Okay, so tonight I'm going to give you an overview of the 4 classes right now so that you can see what to expect each time you come. Tonight we're going to learn composting. We're going to learn about soil and how important it is in having a healthy garden. And we want to show you some online resources that you can use to look up information if you have questions after the class. Next week, we're going to talk about seeds and transplanting, and we're going to have a hands-on activity in the parking lot where you will be able to plant some seeds and transplant some little plants and take them home. Okay, after our transplanting lesson, we're going to have Bettina Gatti is going to come in next week and talk about site selection, the seasonality, where the sun goes in the sky during different seasons, and cool and warm season crops. And then after Bettina, we're going to have Laura Hall come and speak to you about irrigation and saving water. And after the break at 8 o'clock, we're going to talk about the benefits of mulching and using mulch. And we're going to talk about raised beds versus in-ground gardening with Joni Ito. It'll show you the difference between when you're gardening in a raised bed as opposed to in the ground. In week 3, which is May 14th, we'll be talking about pest management, which is weeds and bugs. And we'll have a lesson on fruit trees, having an orchard at your home and growing delicious fruit. And finally at 8 o'clock, we'll have a master food preserver, which will come and speak to you about harvesting, preserving foods, and food safety in the garden. Okay, week 4, and our final week, we're going to talk about vegetables and herbs specifically. Like we'll talk about artichokes and what you need to know about that particular thing, but we'll take you through all the common vegetables and herbs. And then after at the 7 o'clock hour, we'll talk about container gardening and tools and tool care. And our last class for the 4 series is about edible landscaping and how you can garden in more places in your yard than you thought you could. That one will be taught by Paula. She is in the back of the room. Okay, if you attend all 4 classes, you will get a certificate of graduation at the end of the class. Any questions about that so far? Okay, we think that you will get a well-rounded education about gardening over the next 4 weeks. And as each class, the way we structured it is we're going to have a speaker, then we're going to take a 10-minute break from 50 after the hour to the hour. We're going to take a 10-minute break. That's your time to get up, go to the bathroom, stretch your legs, get a glass of water. But we'd like you to be back in your seats at the top of the hour for the next. All right, thank you. All right, our first speaker is Randy Thompson. He is going to talk to you about composting and how valuable that skill is in your garden. Randy, go away.
Primer señor, Randy, les va a dar un seguimiento a
Hello. I'm going to do something. I want to demonstrate something. Something I do every day. I just made some garlic here. This is a jar that I keep in my kitchen. All right. This is my compost jar. Compost jar. Onion? Squeeze the skin on an onion. The outside around. What do you do with that? Trash. Okay, maybe there's something else you can do with it. Feel this guy back a little bit? Yeah, see, we're getting some good onion here.
I don't know, we could make one. Do you know how to make one?
Excellent. I'm going to take a little more off. It's kind of papery. Okay. Now, let's get into this guy. All right.
Let's get to the newest we have.
Now I'm going to dice this onion.
Okay, good.
That looks good. That's very edible. I'm going to take that and put it in my bowl here. Now what about the rest of this? Somebody said trash. What if I reduce the size?
Que si lo hago más pequeño.
I like it very small,
Me gusta más pequeño.
like that. What I'm doing is I'm increasing surface area.
Estoy haciendo más campo para la área.
See that? Small pieces. This could be a banana skin, this could be a pumpkin from
Puede
Halloween.
ser plátano, puede ser de calabaza de Halloween.
Oh, some lime.
Limón.
Lime. Let's take that. So I'm gonna take about a quarter of my lime. Yeah,
Un
that's
cuarto
good.
de limón.
Let's put that in there. I like that. Let's see. I'll leave the rest of this lime right here. Is more trash?
Es más basura.
Compost.
Compost.
No trash.
Compost.
This is good, this is organic.
Es orgánico.
I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna put that in my jar. Okay, I had some garlic, there it is, there's my garlic. Let's take this garlic, I already broke it off the clove, and all that paper went right in there too. I'm gonna cut that up,
Va a cortar el ajo y lo va a poner.
look at that, we'll mince that up a little bit. All right. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Usted sabe dónde va con todo lo que está haciendo, ¿verdad?
What's next?
¿Qué sigue?
Well, let's do that. Let's take this avocado out of here. All right, avocado. That goes right in there too.
¿Dónde va eso?
Trash?
Hogar.
Trash?
¿Basura? No.
See if I get this up here. Let's see. There we go. We'll do one more. Do one more. By the way, Pam, tell me when I've got about 5 minutes, and I'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Está hablando con Pam, que le diga que me quedan 5 minutos para cerrar la presentación.
Okay, here comes one more avocado. These are good, these are ripe.
Son buenos, están maduros.
My wife bought these about a week ago.
Esposa los compró como hace una semana.
Okay, can't do this without smoking. Oh, very nice. All right. Trying to do this a lot. Maybe I don't need all that. Just a little bit. Yeah, so couple of these ends you cut through. Okay, you've all done this
Todos son hechos
at home.
en casa, ¿no?
Maybe a little salt.
Un poquito de sal.
Okay, now I'm gonna mix that up.
Lo voy a mezclar.
Who wants some guacamole? Let me get this mixed up and I'll pass it around.
Lo voy a mezclar y lo voy a amasar.
Here we go. Okay, I didn't bring a fork with me today, so I'm gonna just use this knife.
No traje un tenedor, voy a hacer cuchillo.
Okay, this is looking pretty good.
Se ve bien.
Now, so here's some avocado. That,
Muy bien.
take some, pass it around. Now what I did there was I played in the kitchen,
Estaba jugando en la cocina.
my trash can.
¿Su bote de basura?
These are my avocado shells. I'm going to cut these in half. Oh, and maybe a quarter. Small pieces. Soon they're just going to disappear right before my eyes. Remember, I'm increasing surface area. Okay? So, into the jar. My jar also has last night's dinner. We had artichokes. You know the choke and the leaves that you eat? Right in there. The rest of this will go back in the refrigerator. I'll use it again tomorrow night. What goes in the garbage? Good point. Okay, there's very little. There's very little trash here. And that's the point I'm trying to make. In your kitchen, everything that is green, the heel of a lettuce, the bottom of the celery, the shell of your orange, your lemons, your limes. That's all good, organic stuff. It all should go in your and my jar is always right on my counter in the kitchen. It's open, see, it's a good jar, so it doesn't smell. Right, I empty this about twice a week into my pile, in my compost pile. So I'm going to back up and talk about compost. You see where I'm coming from, though. In my kitchen, I don't have a lot of garbage. Mostly I have Kleenex and avocado pits, an occasional bone. So I'm going to back up now and talk about compost. What is good soil? And by the way, I'm trying not to ask any trick questions. But a good soil is 1/4 air, 1/4 water, almost half, 45%, is parent material, sand, silt, clay, small rock, minerals. Yeah, look at that. Feel like that's my backyard. Only about 5%, maybe 10% if it's a really pretty soil. Will you have organics, compost? So everything that's in here becomes this, and only about 5% of your total garden needs to be this. How do we get this?
Does the jar have to be in any specific material, or can it be like plastic or anything like
Yeah,
that?
take a look. You can open it. You can feel it, smell it. That's out of my compost piles. That's neat stuff. I like glass, ceramic, stainless steel, because they don't absorb smells. Plastic can get the stinking out after a while. Okay? So if you have an old cookie jar, bring it out and let it sit there proudly. Don't hide it. Keep it up there when you cook, and that's one of your tools. All right. Yeah, this has never had cookies in it. So let's talk about how you make a good compost. A compost is made up of 4 ingredients. Just like soil, there's air and water. In fact, water serves a special purpose in compost. It's the freeway for the bacteria. If it's dry, compost stops. If it's too wet, it can't breathe. It's drowning. So damp. Not wet. Is that good? Now, there's two principal ingredients. I just showed you one from the kitchen. That's green wet stuff. The scientific name for that is nitrogen. In the fall, when my trees drop leaves, I collect all my leaves and I keep them. I take my neighbor's leaves. I get carbon wherever I can get it. My rabbits, they have hay. This is straw. It's very similar. But when I clean their bedding, I keep the bedding and I use it. This brown stuff. Brown is carbon. Okay, carbon and nitrogen, air and water. That's the recipe. So how do you mix these things? How do you make compost? This is a model. And if you look in your book on page 22, you'll see a model just like this. You can build this, or you can buy a compost container, take some wire, anything to hold the stack so air can get at the side. One of them. And this comes apart. And legs, they also. This is so you can turn it. So imagine this is 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide, and 3 feet long. It's a square yard. That's what we're looking for. Is a container to put in 50-50 by weight nitrogen, carbon, air, and water. And when you're ready to mix it, all you have to do is move your pile and start mixing into the new pile. Just keep moving it. Add some water. It looks a little dry. The outsides get dry. Keep it going. Pretty soon the whole pile's over here. To be honest, it's hard to get this full right off the bat. So what I do is I add things and I mix it. When it's finally full, I give it another mix. I move that pile again to make sure I have water in there, and I close the pile. I don't add anything else. That full container, in about 8 weeks. I would say 8 weeks to 12 weeks. It depends on how lazy you are. That will cook. It'll cook down to half or maybe less. And when it comes out, it'll be like that bag. This is what it'll be. This is gold. So you add this back to your beds. And this is NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and trace minerals. This is also putting everything that you don't eat back into the garden so the plants can eat it. No garbage. It's pretty good.
Sorry.
I want to show you a couple of tools.
Turning off my ringer.
Everybody knows what this is, clippers, high-pass clippers, for trimming bushes.
Okay, so
This is another tool I use in the garden. It's a grass clipper. This tool does the same thing in my garden that this tool does in my kitchen. When I pull plants and I want to put them in my compost bucket, I cut them up. I can get a big bite with a tool like that. And I spend a lot of time cutting things and making them smaller and putting them in a pile. So I wind up not putting very much in my green can. Your lawn, when you cut your lawn, your hedges, branches, tree limbs, you name it. It's all green or brown, and it adds to the mix. I have some notes here over on this wall. Let me bring these out. These are some examples of things that are good. These are things that are good. Raw fruit, raw vegetables, remember in that jar. Peelings from everything, including eggshells, by the way. Eggshells are good. Calcium. Oh, there it is, eggshells. Coffee grounds. Coffee grounds will raise the acid slightly. If you don't put them in your compost, you can add them directly, actually, with water. Mix them up in your coffee pot. Pour them directly on your roses. They love it. Your citrus trees, they love acid. So that's another way to use your coffee. And I also have shellfish on this, and that's because shellfish have chitin. Is that word? Chitin. Chitin retains moisture. So when it goes in your soil, it holds moisture. In the compost and also for the roots. So it's actually good if you have shrimp, crab, lobster, shells. If you eat those things, you can crush them up and throw them in. Remember, especially with things like that. Remember that compost piles also is good if you have a cover. A cover prevents rain from drowning the pile. It also holds moisture, because when the pile gets hot, moisture comes up and it turns it back into the pile. It also keeps critters out. You know, squirrels, skunks, possum, raccoon, dogs, cats. Keep them out. You want to keep them out. And also, I think it's good to point out what not to put in a pile. You don't need to put dirt in your compost. If it sits on the ground, the bacteria will travel up from the ground. That's all the contact you need. Ashes, don't put ashes in. If you have plants that have diseases, put them in the trash. The compost will not kill the diseases. Dog and cat and human manure, things that eat meat, carnivores. Don't do that. If you have weeds and they've gone to seed, the compost will not kill the seeds. So they'll spread. Thank you. And last, meat, fat, dairy, especially meat, fat, and dairy. The fats will be a detractive nuisance and cause problems. Don't put those in your compost. So that's your garbage right there. I would like to ask if you have any questions. Sure.
You threw the avocado pips away. Can those be planted and those trees would grow avocados?
There's a long answer. The short answer is yes, you'll get a tree, but it won't be the tree that gave you that avocado. So if you had a Hass avocado, you won't necessarily get a Hass tree. Avocados like to keep changing it up. So the only way you're going to get that kind of tree is to buy it at a nursery or grow it with grafting. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything you can think of? So your book, page 22 to 25, is a real good discussion about compost.
Randy, thank you so much.
Okay, good.
One of the things that's the most important for a gardener is understanding the soil. basis for the health of your garden, the health of your plants, and the nutrition of the food that you grow. Soil is the most important thing, and if you understand how to keep the life in the soil alive, you can work less and produce much more. Okay. In the soil, most people think that soil is just there to hold the plant up. Nothing could be further from the truth. Just like we have inside of our stomachs, we have a whole microcosm of bacteria and fungus and flora to keep us alive. It helps us digest our food. The soil has the same thing for the plants. We didn't even realize until recently, when we got microscopes that were powerful enough to look into the soil, that there's a whole living ecosystem in there with fungus and algae and bacteria and microscopic worms and little spiders. Under the microscope, the whole thing is alive. Okay, so my first question was, what is the difference between dirt and soil? Okay, it's not a trick question. Soil is the living ecosystem that contains everything that works together. The plants, the animals, the air, the water, the bacteria, the fungus, everything all works together to have a living ecosystem. Whereas dirt is just misplaced soil. Okay? This little kid, he went into the garden, he got dirt on it. Okay? He walks away, now that soil is not part of that ecosystem anymore. It will soon die and it will become anaerobic and it'll never be good soil again. So once you remove soil away from the garden, you kill it. It's dead. It's never going to be good soil. So what you want to do is make sure that you always do everything to foster the life in your soil. So here's what I was talking about when I was trying to get the computer going. Soil has a lot of functions. It supports the plants. It provides the nutrients. The nutrients, by the way, are already in the dirt. It's just that the plants can't take them up unless those nutrients have passed through the bodies of these little creatures. It provides moisture for them. In other words, they can take up the water from the soil. It keeps them warm. When the sun warms the soil, it warms the root of the plants. And it protects them from being blown in the wind or from storms and things like that. The dirt that you walk in your garden and you get dirt on your feet, right? And you take it away from the garden and that's no good anymore. Just the same as if you go into a pond and you get water on you and you take it away from the pond. It's not part of that ecosystem anymore. So now what's on you is water, it's not pond. And so when you take dirt away from the garden, it's not soil anymore, it's just dirt. So once you remove it from its home, it's no good anymore. Okay. How is soil formed? Okay. In the beginning, there was rock. There was volcanic rock. There was sandstone that was formed at the bottom of oceans, but there wasn't any soil. It took millions of years for soil to develop. Does anybody know how long it takes to make 1 inch of topsoil? Here's a little quiz for you. Does it take 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, or 500 years? Anybody want to guess? It takes 500 years to make 1 inch of topsoil in nature. Okay, it takes a very long time. And some of the soil is very thin in the places in the earth, and other parts it's very thick. And most of that has to do with topography. That's a fancy word that means mountains and valleys. When it rains and storms and there is floods and there is glaciers and everything that affects everything, it takes the big boulders and it breaks them down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. Once it gets down to be the point where it's part of our soil, it's either 3 things. It's either sand, silt, or clay. Sand is the largest of the particles. As a matter of fact, if I was a piece of sand, I would be that big compared to a piece of silt, which is like this big, compared to a piece of clay, which is so small you can't even see it under a microscope. So the really big difference. So the sand, the silt, and the clay are mostly, you have all 3 of those in your garden. You're going to have any combination of sand, silt, and clay. But the question is, do you have mostly sand, do you have mostly silt, or do you have mostly clay? Now, why is it important to know this? It's important to know this because if you have mostly sand, sand doesn't hold water very well at all. As a matter of fact, when you put water on sand, it pours right through. So you might get it wet, but 10 or 15 minutes later, huh?
I mean, after 15 minutes, it's gonna get dry.
It's gonna get dry, exactly, it's gonna get dry again. Whereas if you have clay, you'll put the water on it, but it won't soak in. It'll just sit on the top. And it might soak in a little bit for over a long period of time, but once it gets wet, it never dries out. And it's the molecules are so tightly packed together that there's no room in there for air and for water to get in. And so basically the roots can't live very well because they'll suffocate without air and without water. If you have sand and you pour the water on it, the water will go down fairly deep, but only in a short, narrow area. If you have clay, the water will spread out, but only in a very narrow surface. So the question is, how do you water your garden efficiently? You have to know what kind of soil you have. So one of the ways you can do that is you can test your soil. There's 4 major tests for your soil. The first one is you take a handful of soil, you moisten it, you squeeze it in your hand, and you let it go. If it holds together for a short time, okay, and then you shake it and it falls apart, that's perfect. That's exactly the soil you want. If it won't hold together at all, that means you have mostly sand. Okay? And if you squeeze it and it holds together and nothing you can do to take it apart, you have mostly clay. So this test, even though it's a free test and you can all do it in your own garden, is actually very important because it tells you if you have mostly sand, mostly clay, or something in between. Have you ever heard the term loam? L-O-A-M? Loam is a perfect balance between sand, silt, and clay, and organic matter, to give you that wonderful soil that everybody knows. When you see a picture of it, you know it's just perfect soil. The loam is what you're trying to get to. But how do you get there? If you test your soil at home and you find out your soil is sandy, how do you fix it? If you have sandy soil, the best solution is to add compost. The compost will mix with the sand, it will hold water, it will hold nutrients, and it will be helpful for the plants to stay, if you just plant something in sand, it'll fall right over the first time you have a windstorm. But with the compost added in, it's stronger. If you have clay, then you also want to add compost. Because with the clay, there's no room for air and there's no room for water. You want to take that really dense material and break it into something looser. So by adding compost, you loosen up the soil, you make room for air, you make room for the water, and the plants can do much better. If you have a silty soil, which is kind of rare, but again, the answer is adding compost, because compost will fix almost any kind of a problem in the soil. Now, most of you cannot make enough compost at home. You're going to do what Randy does, and Randy was right. Composting at home is the best thing you can do. It really is. You pay for that stuff. It's good. You want to keep it. You don't want to just throw it away and then go to the store and buy more. But if you've used everything you have at home and you don't have enough, you can go to the store and you can buy more compost. Make sure when you're buying compost that you buy organic compost, because we don't know. For example, in the city they have a composting program. They have those green bins, and people cut their stuff down, and then they cut their grass and they put it in the green bin, and the city takes it away. When the city takes it away, they compost it. Sometimes they sell it to other companies, and those companies compost it further. They bag it up and they take it to the store and you buy it. Okay? But you can do that at home yourself without having to go through that. But the problem with the city compost is you don't know what was in that compost to start with. Did that homeowner spray pesticides? Did they spray herbicides? Did they have weeds in their garden and they threw those into the green bin? Right? Because if you have weeds at home, you should put them in the black can, not the green can. Because you don't want those getting into the compost supply. It's like you wouldn't put contaminants in the water supply. Don't put weeds in the compost supply. Okay? If you do have the city compost, it does have a valid purpose. You can use that along your walkways in between your raised beds. You can put it in your ornamental beds in your front yard around your plants to keep the moisture down and to make it look really pretty. But you don't want to put that in your vegetable bed. Okay? Okay, so, what do you put in your raised bed? Okay, you are all gonna be getting a raised bed, right? Okay. You're gonna wanna make your own soil. The beauty of a raised bed is you wanna make your own soil. So what are you gonna put in there? You're not gonna put the dirt from your yard, although you could put a little bit of it, but again, you haven't tested it, you don't know what's in it. How has it been treated before you lived there? Did somebody pour gasoline on it? We don't know. So if you get organic materials, for example, some potting soil, a commercial potting soil is mostly peat moss with a little bit of perlite added. Perlite is that white stuff, you see it looks like little white, lightweight rocks. That is a volcanic rock that they put in very high temperature, and it expands like popcorn. They blow it up like popcorn, it's just like popping corn. But when you put that in your garden, it does two things. It actually aerates the soil, it allows for good drainage, but at the same time, every one of those pieces of perlite holds on to water. If you look at it under a microscope, there's all these little cavities in the perlite. Kind of like if you picture popcorn, how there's like little cavities. Every one of those holds on to water and it will release it back to the soil as it needs it. So if you have a high percentage of perlite in your potting mix, that's good. You also want to add steer manure or animal manures, but make sure they are from vegetarian animals. Cows are usually a safe bet. Rabbits, goats, sheep, anything that doesn't eat meat. Never dog or cat stuff should ever go in your compost, and you should never want to use that. And nothing from humans. I know there was some people going around saying that you should use like pee in your compost bin. That's not a good idea. Okay? So in your raised bed, we've got the potting soil, which has the peat moss. It has perlite in it. You're going to be adding organic compost that you bought at the store. You're going to be adding some animal manures, and make sure they're well composted already. If they get them up to a high enough temperature, it kills off all the bad germs, and it's safe to use, okay? Now, the first year you fill your raised beds at home, it's going to be all the way to the top. Let's say our raised bed is this tall, and you fill the soil all the way to the top, and you water it, and you plant your plants in it. By the end of year one, that soil is going to shrink down to half or less than half. Then you have to add more, okay? Then the next year, you grow your crops, and it shrinks down to maybe 1/3. The next year, you do it again, and it only shrinks a little bit. And after that, you just add organic material on top every year to just add it, top it off a little bit. But it takes about 3 years for it to become a stable soil. Okay? Now, if you do it right with the organics, you're going to be developing this healthy flora and fauna. The fauna I'm talking about, you know earthworms. You can see those with your eyes. There's the little pill bugs. There's grubs. All of those are big enough that you can see, right? You want those in your garden to an extent because those are actually going to till through the soil. The worms, when they eat this, they eat the organic material in there, like little chopped up leaves or whatever. When they move through the soil, they leave behind their castings, and castings are the most rich fertilizer in the entire world. So if you have a healthy population of worms in your garden, they're going to be constantly adding fertilizer to your garden. Very good thing to have. You also have these little things called microscopic worms called nematodes, okay? There's a whole layer of, it's just like the law of the jungle. The lion is like the top of the food chain in the jungle. Okay, pretty much a rabbit doesn't stand a chance against a lion, right? Okay. Under the soil, it's the same thing. There's one layer where there's organic material. That is eaten by the bacteria. The bacteria, in turn, are eaten by the nematodes and the fungi and the protozoa. Then down the row from that, the fungi and everything eat those, and every single time along the way, as they poop, they're providing microbial manure for your plants, okay? That's the only form the plant can take up. It cannot, if there's nitrogen in that soil, but there's no life in that soil, the plant can't get the nitrogen, okay? So what do people do, like commercial farmers? Commercial farmers, what they do is they till their soil. They want it to be light and fluffy. And then they plant their crops, and they've killed all the life in the soil. Okay? So the crops aren't doing very well, so they buy fertilizer. They put the fertilizer on the crops. The crops all of a sudden have a form that they can use for a little while. They grow fast. When they grow fast, it invites the bugs to come in and eat them. The bugs love the tender little new shoots. The farmer says, oh, I have bugs. I better get a spray. They spray the crops. They kill even more life in the soil, okay? Then the crop is harvested, and they till it again, and they start all over again. Every year they do this, the soil gets worse and worse and worse. And they are relying on those chemicals, the fertilizers and the pesticides, to keep the crops under control. This is exactly the opposite of what we want in our home garden. In our home garden, we don't want to use any chemicals if we don't have to. We want the plants to naturally get their elements from the soil, like they should. It's already in there. It's all there. You don't need to add anything. When you have all of that active life and everything, the plant is healthy and strong. It doesn't grow too fast. It grows only a little bit, but not fast enough to attract bugs. So it resists the bugs, it resists diseases, it resists anything that's going to attack it. The plant is healthy and strong, and you'll get a much higher production. It may not be as tall, but it's going to be thick and bushy and green, and also the most important part is it's going to have better nutrition in that plant when you go to eat it. Doing okay? If I buy a broccoli at the store, okay, they put it on, they actually have done tests on this, the FDA. The broccoli we buy today has only 1/3 of the nutrition that it had in 1930. Okay, because of the way that they're farming. The broccoli that we grow at home, we can bring that up to 100% of the nutrition. So you can do a better thing for your family to give them more nutritious food by growing it the organic way. And the way you want to do that is to keep from using anything other than organic stuff in your garden. Keep away the chemicals and the pesticides. You okay? Okay. When you see 2 bags of fertilizer at the store, let's say, for example, that you just want to start, you have a brand new raised bed. Now, when you put your new raised bed in, it's going to have no life in there, okay? If you're going to add something to the soil, that's the only time you want to do it. You can till it at that point, no harm done. You can add a fertilizer to it at that point, organic, of course, no harm done. But from that point on, you never want to till it again. No rototillers, no shovels. You want to disturb that soil as little as possible. As you go on, that life will develop, and it will get better and better every year. And so the worst thing you could do is, after you've developed all this beautiful life in your soil, is to go buy a bag of fertilizer at the store and put it in and kill it all. Because that high nitrogen fertilizer in the store will burn them. It will just kill them all. How do you tell whether or not you have an organic fertilizer or a commercial fertilizer? By the way, most of those are made out of petroleum products. Generally, if you have chicken manure or cow manure or rabbit manure or anything that's from plants or anything that's organic, it's going to have a very low number. There's always 3 numbers on the bag. The first number is nitrogen. The second number is phosphorus. And the third number is potassium. The nitrogen number is what lots of commercial farmers put on their soil, but you don't need to, because the nitrogen is already in the air and it's already in the soil. So you don't really need that. But if you're going to get an organic one, that number is going to be low. It's going to be 5 or less. So the numbers might say something like 10, 10, 10, or 5, 3, 2, or 4, 1, 6. That always in that order is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The nitrogen is responsible for the green growth of the leaves. The phosphorus is responsible for the flowers. And the potassium is responsible for the health of the roots. So if you're going to get fertilizer for your begonias or petunias, You want the high middle number. Oh, I should have done it that way. The middle number should be high. That will encourage flowers. Now, people ask me, what about Miracle-Gro? Miracle-Gro is a synthetic fertilizer. If I have a pot of flowers on my porch, and I'm not going to be eating them, Miracle-Gro is fine. But for my vegetables, when I'm going to eat it, Miracle-Gro is death to the animals in the soil. Okay? Now, there's one technique that people, for example, use to get rid of, let's say they have an area they want to garden something like this middle area, and they have grass. Some people would think you have to dig the grass out and then till the soil, turn it over, and then get a rototiller. You don't have to do any of that. You can lay cardboard out on top of the grass in the area that you want. Then you lay some potting soil or some kind of manure or something on top of the cardboard. Then some grass clippings on top of that. Some leaves on top of that. The point is you're making layers of organic material in any order you want. Put some straw on the top. Wet it down. You come back in 2 months, you have beautiful soil to garden in and you never had to dig anything up. No tilling, no rototilling, no digging. It's called lasagna gardening. And it's just like the lasagna you eat at an Italian restaurant. It's layered. Okay? When you have your garden now, you can also do the layering, but you're just going to do the top layer. So when you have compost, beautiful compost that you've made in your compost bin, you don't need to mix it in. Just lay it on top of the soil around the plants. Okay? If you want to take a couple of worms from the compost bin, if there's worms in there and you put them in there, that's fine. The worms will enrich your garden and they'll make more worms and they'll make babies and then it's a good thing. So you can add some worms. If you have somebody in your neighborhood that is growing the organic way and they have beautiful soil, you can take a bucket of their soil and bring it to your garden and inoculate your garden with all the healthy life. And it will get you off to a faster start. Okay, so what have we learned? Let's just repeat really quickly. There's life in the soil. We have to respect that life. And by the way, never walk in your garden bed. If you were gardening in this area, you would want to make some pathways where you could walk that you would not garden in. And only walk on those pathways because you don't want to compress the soil because it pushes all the air out and there's no place for water. You want to keep those holes in the soil for the water to come through and the air to come through. If you are going to have to walk in your garden bed for whatever reason, you can put a board down and walk on top of the board. It will distribute your weight a little bit so it won't compress the soil. Have you ever gone into the mountains and you see a well-worn path through the mountains and you notice there's nothing growing in that path, but there's stuff growing on both sides? The reason nothing grows there is because of compaction. They've pressed it down and pressed it down and pressed it down. They've made the soil dead. There's nothing can live in there. No life. So never walk in your bed. A raised bed is good for that because you walk around it, you can reach into it, you don't have to walk in it. But in a garden in the ground, it's something to think about when you're planning so that you have pathways. Same thing in your yard. If you have an ornamental bed on the side of your house, make a way that you're always going to walk. And that's your pathway around the, it could be curved, it could be, stepping stones, it could be just a different kind of mulch, but don't walk in the place where you're growing the plants. Your plants will do much better if they have the ability to breathe. You'll use less water too. All right, let's see, what else? Okay, there's another test you can do, by the way. I forgot to mention this when we were testing your thing, but you can get a jar. You can dig in your yard and put about 3 inches of soil in the bottom of the jar. You might want to take it a couple of places. Then you want to put some dishwasher soap in there and shake it, and fill it up with water and shake it really good. And set it down and let it sit for like a day. It will always be that the sand is on the bottom. There'll be layers. The sand is on the bottom, the silt is in the middle, the clay is on the top. and the organic material is on the top of that. So you can actually see the layers, and you can see percentage-wise. If this is 100% and that much of it's sand, I have 50% sand in my soil. If you only have that much sand and that much clay, you can see that too. So that helps you to know. But does anybody remember what the cure is if you have too much sand? Compost. What's the cure if you have too much clay? Compost. Awesome. Okay. And we all know not to. So does anybody own a rototiller? Anybody? Any of you guys own a rototiller? That's really good. You don't need one. You don't need it. It's the easy way of gardening is actually the best way of gardening. Is the no digging, less work. Yeah. Just respect the creatures and they'll do the work for you. Okay, now, one other small thing is, we're going to talk about this next week too, about seasonality and everything, but when you do plant your crops, you want to put like plants together that have the same requirements. For example, if you're putting in something that doesn't want much water, don't put it next to a piece of lettuce that needs a lot of water, because then you'll either be giving too much water to one or not enough water to the other. So think about it. This end of the bed will be my dry or drier. This end of the bed will be my wetter. Okay? And you don't have to plant in rows. Get that out of your head. One method that people use is square foot gardening. And some people actually draw lines, but some people just do it in their head. But every square foot, they'll put a different kind of a plant. So this one will be maybe broccoli, and then this will be cabbage, this one might be lettuce, this one might be spinach, this one might be something else. Again, group them by water need, and the time of the year. Bettina's going to talk about that next week. But you can basically cram a lot of plants in a small space, and if the soil is healthy, you don't have to allow lots of space. If you think about how a farmer does it, they have these rows and they have these big spaces between. You don't need to do that. You can put a plant here and a plant here and a plant here and a plant here and a plant here, because we're not having to get big pieces of equipment into our fields to harvest it. So you can plant very close together, and the soil, if it's healthy and strong, it will support many more plants than you think you can put in that bed. Okay. All right, let me take questions. Sorry I didn't have my PowerPoint for you. It was really good too. But anyway, yes.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
There's can you turn the dirt over when you try to pull the weeds or something? Not in the vegetable gardens, but in whatever place that they're growing.
Okay. You know what? The answer is yes, you need to dig those weeds out, and some of those weeds have a long taproot. You need to dig it out to get that out. What they're talking about, that's just a little small area. It'll recover pretty quickly. But if you're talking about just digging up the whole bed and destroying it all, that's what you want to avoid. But let's say I'm going to harvest something and I have roots in the soil. If I'm not going to eat the roots, like in a carrot, you have to pull the root out because you're going to eat the root, right? But if I'm going to harvest, let's say celery, I may just want to cut it off at the soil surface, eat my celery, and just let those roots decay right where they sit. Because as they decay, it'll provide more nutrients to the soil. As they shrink away, it'll make more cavities for air and water to go through. It'll enrich the soil. You don't have to dig that celery out of the ground. You can leave it.
Sorry that maybe this question is for maybe a lesson in the future.
Sure.
But I have a tree, and it has a lot of weeds.
Okay.
And we need to pull all the weeds from the tree.
Okay.
So
What kind of a tree is it?
it's an orange tree.
An orange tree. And these are like baby oranges growing into the tree?
How?
You mean?
Yes.
Is it? I'm sorry. What kind of weeds are they?
I think they're mixed. There's grass and there's weeds.
Okay. Okay. Well, one way you can do it if you don't want to have to dig them out is you can actually smother them too. If you wanted to, you could lay the same thing I was talking about lasagna gardening. If you're going to do this particular tree, you could lay cardboard out on top, put wet down your soil, lay the cardboard down on top of all the weeds, put some organic material on top of it, shredded leaves or straw or compost, whatever you have, put a pretty thick layer on it. And it'll smother those out, it'll kill them all. They'll just disintegrate and just go back into the soil. That's an easier way than digging them. That's one option you could do. If you have something that's gonna go to seed, I would very carefully either cut it off and gingerly put it in the trash can, because you don't wanna spread the seeds. I've seen so many people, they have weeds this high in their garden and there's all these seeds at the top. And they dig it out, and they shake it all the way to the trash can. They just spread 2,000 weed seeds on the ground. They've made their job much harder. So if you have something that's gone to seed, treat it very carefully. Don't disturb it. Cut it at the bottom if you have to. Gently put it into the trash can. Don't spread it around. And then dig the root out if you have to afterwards, because you don't. That's the most important thing, because you're causing work for yourself later on. But do you like the smothering idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, well, my husband sometimes does the pulling of the weeds,
Uh-huh.
but they regrow, and he keeps doing that every year. So.
Yeah. You're going to want to put mulch around your trees anyway. Okay.
Yeah, we do put mulch, but they grow on.
Did they go through the mulch?
Yeah.
Okay, that's when you need the cardboard to smother them. So I would say rake all that mulch away, get down to bare dirt. You can even mow it or cut it as short as you can. Then put the cardboard, wet it down, put the cardboard down, put your organic material on top of that, put a really thick layer of mulch on top of that, wet it down. It will smother those weeds out.
And they're not gonna grow through the.
Not going to grow through the cardboard. Maybe very few will where there's like a seam or something, but not very much. It'll definitely cut down 90% of them. Okay? Yeah, the worst thing you could do is, for example, use Roundup or something like that to kill your weeds, especially if it's under a tree, because when you spray it on the plant, let's say, hello sweetie, you spray it on the plant, it gets absorbed by the plant, it goes into the plant roots. It can actually, but when you spray the Roundup, it goes on the weed, but then it'll get sucked into the ground and it'll get absorbed by the tree. And you'll actually be harming the tree. Probably not enough to kill it, but it might be enough to make it turn yellow and be sickly. So you don't want to use any chemicals. Okay, any other questions I can help you guys with? How many of you have gardened before? Have you gardened before? You have none of you have gardened before? You've never had a garden before? Okay. It's actually easier than you think. It really is very easy. And it's actually satisfying to go out. You know, after a hard day's work, you want to make dinner, and you can go out and you can pick an onion. Oh, I don't have to go to the store. Pick a garlic, you know, get some cilantro, get a little bit of sage or whatever. And, you know, it's really nice to be able to just eat out of your yard. It's wonderful. And my garden is actually in my front yard. So my garden is in my front yard, and people ask me, don't people take your vegetables? I haven't had any problems, really. It's been fine. They're very respectful. And it started a lot of conversations with people when they walk by. I love your garden. What are you growing? And I say, here, take some zucchini. Here, want some tomatoes? No. But the most important reason to grow is, have you ever tasted a store-bought tomato? What does a store-bought tomato taste like?
Water.
Water, nothing. Have you ever tasted a homegrown tomato? It's tart, it's sweet, it's full of life, it's got so many different magical things going on in your mouth. It's wonderful. That's the reason you want to grow your own food, because it tastes so much better. Not only because it's fun to do, but it tastes better, it's more nutritious, it's less expensive, but that taste is the main thing. Yes? More healthy, exactly, it's a lot more healthy. Okay, so I hope I've taught you to be, did you have a question? Yes.
Yo sí me doy cuenta en las frutas, que por ejemplo yo soy de México y en México las peras, las peras van envueltas con un papel como papel chino, y cuando las sacan de ahí todavía tienen el olor a la pera, y las de aquí no huelen a nada.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. That's true. Because it depends on how that pear was grown and how it was cared for, and also the variety of the pear. When you go to the grocery store and you see all of that food stacked up, it looks like a lot of choices, right? It's only 5% of the food that's available to us. We're not even eating the other 95%. Did you want to translate that? Sure. At the grocery store, what we commonly buy, what we're used to, is only 5% of the food supply. But the other 95% is better stuff. It's just not very commercially viable to grow. In other words, you have to, it won't transport to market before going bad, or or maybe it's so thin it'll break easy. But those are the ones you can grow at home, you don't have to transport them. Did that answer your question about the pear?
Sí, pues que hay diferencia, pues que tal vez porque
Just notice the difference.
Yeah.
porque está transportada, porque traen fruta de allá para acá y va perdiendo el sabor, igual en la tienda de aquí, ¿no? Cuando
Just
llega
like they have to transport the seed from over there to here, loses the flavor.
Yeah, exactly. And it may also be a different variety, and that's another reason too. If you want to grow that pear, you have, if you want that pear, you have to grow it yourself, because you can't buy it in the store. For tomatoes, for example, we have 28 varieties of tomatoes growing in my yard. None of those are available at the grocery store. There's Cherokee Purple, there's Green Zebra, there's Black Prim. All of these tomatoes would never make it in the grocery store. They're too delicate. The commercial growers won't touch them. But they're delicious. They're really good. Yeah. And when we get to the food preservation section, by the way, on my tomatoes, we grow a lot of tomatoes because we dehydrate them and we eat dried tomatoes all year long. I still have some left over from last year. We put them in salads, we put them in our, in cooking, whatever we want to make, and it adds this, they're delicious. It's almost like eating candy when you eat a dried tomato. It's so sweet. It's really, really good. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't have my PowerPoint presentation for you. It was really good, you'll have to trust me. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I hope you learned something about respecting the soil and treating it right. If you treat the soil right, it will treat you right. Thank you.
You were talking about that we're not supposed to plant seeds, like seeds that we're gonna eat on the commercial, like Miracle Grow. That's another thing. I don't remember the name of it.
Okay.
So you're not supposed to put anything at all. Like I just planted some seeds that she was trying to grow.
Okay.
I like basil.
Okay.
And I put it in a commercial thing, commercial soil or whatever.
Okay.
And
You just bought a bag at the store.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm not supposed to eat that, or can I transplant it?
Okay. If it's just commercial soil, and does it say it
It's
has
not
added
organic.
fertilizer? It says organic?
It's
Not organic. It's just plain, but there's nothing added to it, right?
I don't know. It does have a lot of fancy names like ammonia something, the nitrogen or something. I don't remember.
Okay. Here's the thing. That's probably going to be fine.
Okay.
The point is, in a container or what you have now, you're not trying to keep an ecosystem alive. It's just in a container.
Yes.
Okay. So if it stays in that container, you have to feed it. It's not going to live because there's no ecosystem. It's like dirt instead of soil, kind of a thing. Anytime you have a plant in a container, it's removed from the ecosystem. It's like it's on life support. You have to feed it. You have to water it. You have to care for it. It's going to die.
So you need, like, it is just gonna serve for maybe this time that I'm gonna grow that, and then it's
Yeah.
gonna die, and I need to throw it away and get another one?
No. I didn't say it right. I'm sorry. Where are you going to eventually grow this basil?
I just put it there because I didn't have any other place to grow it.
Are you
But
waiting-
I'm trying to compost, and I'm
Okay. Are
trying
you
to-
waiting to get a garden and you're going to move it to the
Yeah.
garden? Okay. And basil, by the way, is not a rock. It's a perennial plant. In other words,
Okay.
I have some basil plants that are 5 years old. And they'll tell you on the package, this plant gets 2 feet high and 2 feet wide. Don't you believe it? They're big. They're gigantic. And you can cut the bottom leaves off and grow it almost like a little tree. You want to. I actually have done that where I've grown other crops underneath and the basil sits above it all because it's so tall. So that basil is going to be around for a long time. You may not want to put that one in your garden bed. You might want to find another place in your yard and grow it there. Okay? But the one you have is fine. Save it, keep it, When you planted it in its eventual home, it'll adapt just fine, it'll be okay. Yeah, you don't have to throw it away. There's nothing wrong with it.
But the ground that I got is not gonna,
When you're first filling your raised beds, you're gonna use soil like that to fill them up. Remember I told you when you first make your raised bed, there's nothing in it, there's no life in it yet? You have to build that. So when you first get that potting soil, there's no life in it. As a matter of fact, they sterilize it to kill off any bad germs. That's okay, we want that, we don't want bad germs. So you start with sterile potting soil, whether you put it in a container or you put it in your garden bed, it's still gonna be something you either have to build on it, or if you keep it in the container, you're just gonna have to regularly feed it. But you could feed it organically. I hope that makes sense.
yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we can take another 10-minute break. So we won't be able to show you on the computer, but Randy's gonna do a really good job explaining it to you verbally. But the good news is you guys get to get out early tonight. As soon as we're done tonight, we should be out of here by about 8:15 or
Great.
something like that. So Randy, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about resources you can find on the computer.
It just occurred to me to use the whiteboard.
If you turn in your book to the back, page 41, you see a page that says resources. Is it the same? Okay, keep going. There's a page that says resources. Good. 46. 46 is white. Good. Okay, so I'll tell you that I spent the day going to every website. Some work, most work, and a few do not. But the description will tell you what the website should contain. And it would be a very good idea this week to find some time and get on the computer and carefully type in these addresses and look at these websites. One thing I can tell you is when you see a space between words, the way these are set up, there's a line. And what the line is doing is it's covering the symbol underscore. Okay, underscore is shift hyphen. Yeah? Is that clear? So these don't show that, but all these addresses that have a space between two words, know it, there's a shift underscore that separates those words. Okay? So the Common Ground Garden Program, the first area, that's the program that we work with. And you can go to that website and find out things about our program. The next address down is one that I couldn't get to work, so you can ignore that one. Okay, where it says other UC websites, these are specific to the description. Citrus trees, fruits and nuts, backyard orchards. The invasive plants list is another address that is broken. But later in the book, there is an address that works for invasive plants. Small farms, that's another nice website. Okay, some of these websites have newsletters. So if you have a computer at home, you can have them send you the electric newsletter. I don't need to say a lot specifically about most of the rest of these websites, except that it would be good for you to go there and look around. And you'll see information that you can store in your memory and maybe later go back and check that information out. So this is a good resource. We go to these websites all the time. I would like to point out three websites on the last page. The first one is, it says California Invasive Plant Council. Can you see that one? That's the address that works for invasive plants. Those are plants that take over. There's one more website here that's very good, which is, it says here, the Theodore Payne org. It actually says Theodore Payne org, right there in the list. Okay, those are, yes, Theodore Payne org. You see that? And that's a good list for native plants. And those are generally ornamental. Well, that's pretty good for now. That's pretty good for now. I think that gives you sort of a feel for these sites. And if you have questions, please ask. Okay? So if you look at these sites and you find information that doesn't make sense, just go ahead and ask us. We'll help you understand it. Is that good?
You never got one.
Okay, so try and look around this week and look at the various sites and see the kind of information that's out there. It's good, good groups.
Okay, did you guys each get one of these too? Okay, if you didn't get one, we're gonna give you one. But here's the thing. On this is what they call the gardening helpline. Okay, there's a website and there's a telephone number. If you have a gardening question, like let's say for example you say, all of the leaves just fell off my tomato plant. What do I do? You can call this phone number and a master gardener will be on the phone and they will be able to give you the answer. You can also do it on the website. You can put your question down. All the leaves just fell off my tomato. What do I do? They will get back to you within a day, or they might call you back and give you the answers so that you can use this resource. It's totally free from the University of California. It will answer all your gardening questions. Okay? Those online resources that Randy was talking about, what you see when you go there is, this is all about tomatoes. This is all about blueberries. This is all about peaches. This is all about, basil. If you have a specific interest, or I have a weird bug, what is this bug? You can go to the pest section and they'll show you pictures of the bugs and you can point out the one that's bothering you and you can figure out what to do about it, and if it's harmful or maybe it's beneficial. Not all bugs are bad. As a matter of fact, most of the bugs are good. So these websites are there for you as a resource so that you can, after this class is over and a year from now when you have a question, you know where to go to get the answer for your questions. Okay? All right, anyway, thank you. I'm going to get you all one of these. Anybody that needs one of these? Okay, raise your hand, we'll get you one. Toba? Bring them in, huh? Okay, raise your hand, we'll get you one. There you go. There you go. Okay. You can write right here. All right, does anybody have any last questions for the evening that we can help you with? Anything that's coming up this week that you need to know about in your garden? Okay, thank you so much. We will see you here next week.